tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, talofa lava, maloa lele, and welcome to the third day of the Connected Educator New Zealand Aotearoa launch week. We have been pretty much broadcasting a series of webinars pretty solidly over the last couple of days. We're into our third day, and then we get a little break over the weekend, although we do have a Teach Meet special session happening tomorrow on Saturday afternoon. But it's my great pleasure to kick off this session this morning. Connected learning, plotting pathways, navigating mazes, a real focus around digital learning for our learners and what it means to design effective learning in the connected world in which we live. So I'd like to settle us in with our karakia this morning, and then we'll get going. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa ponamo te moana. He hurahi matato I te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tato I a tato katoa, huye takie. So welcome all of you. In a moment I'm going to just give you a quick overview of a proper introduction to myself, but we are hoping to have a wonderful array of guests with us all this morning. A couple of them are keeping me on my toes, but we're hoping to have Audrey Waters joining us from the States. I know that she's had some issues with internet connection this morning. We have in the room with us, and we'll do proper introductions. They've each going to have a short slot to speak to this morning, and so I will do far more fulsome introductions in a moment. But we have Sylvia Tolosano joining us as well. We have Tom Barrett, who I know is now with us in the room. Yay! Simon, if you can just chat with Tom in the chat. We'll just make sure, Tom, that your microphone and camera are working in a second. We have Tongi Lemanu with us this morning as well, and myself. I'm your facilitator, host with the most, and it's my pleasure to be working with you all this morning. So namihi nui kia koutou. In terms of myself, no Yorkshire o Ingarani aho, ko the Shevin te monga, ko the Wolf te awa, ko Bill Spencer toku papa, ko Ini Langley toku mama, he kamahi aho mo ko education, he ako e consultant o ko Karen Malura Spencer toku ingwa, no reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It's just it's my real pleasure to have you all with us this morning, and without further ado, what I would like to do is just give you a quick heads up of how this session is going to roll. So in a moment I'm just going to take a few minutes to just set out the stall in terms of digital technologies and some of the issues and the contexts that we're probably quite familiar with here in New Zealand around e-learning, and then it's going to be my pleasure to introduce our guests, and I've invited each of them to share some ideas based on their own work and their own experiences around some of the opportunities and challenges that we currently face in our connected world in terms of designing really effective learning for our for the young people that we work with, and so we'll hear from each of our guests in turn, but there will be opportunity to ask questions in the chat box, and also to use the hands up icon if you'd like to grab the mic and ask a question during the session as well. I think we're in a really interesting time here in New Zealand, Aotearoa, in terms of the way that we can begin to reimagine what learning might look like. I had a conversation with a colleague the other day who was talking about how for many years it's been a huge technical challenge for many schools in New Zealand to have sufficient technology and infrastructure to even begin to imagine how learning might be different, not just technologically, but pedagogically as well. But in the last few years, we've seen a really strong push, both from government and through the Ministry of Education and grassroots as well, to really support schools to be much more confident that they can begin to rethink and reimagine what might be possible. So in terms of that infrastructure, I mean, if you think about the fact that we have got the rollout of the managed network, so a single high-speed fibre network to connect all schools in New Zealand. I know that N4L is well down the track now. We may be up to, I don't have the exact figure, possibly in the 600-700s at least of schools that are connecting. They're hoping to have all schools in New Zealand connected over the next year or so. You've got the provision from the Ministry of Education for the upgrade of school networks so that they're able to take advantage of that managed network. There are a number of initiatives such as the provision of tele laptops for teachers across New Zealand. There's huge commitment to professional learning and development for teachers in this digital learning, future-focused pedagogy space. So there's huge opportunities, I think, and for many schools, not all schools, but for many schools and kura, the challenge of the infrastructure is one that is slowly but surely being dealt with. And so really we're at a point, and for many schools we're really, I think, at a tipping point where we can be more confident that the infrastructure is there to support us, and schools are introducing lots of different plans and initiatives in terms of provision of devices for young people. And so we can begin to ask ourselves the question, so what should learning look like in these connected contexts? A couple of days ago we had Howard Baldwin with us from the ministry, who reminded us about the Future Focused Learning in Connected Communities report that came out earlier on this year, an initiative driven by the Ministry of Education and by government. And so really there are a number of questions being explored and raised right across New Zealand in lots of different spaces and pockets about what future-focused education can look like. And in a world in which we can all connect, or it's getting easier for us all to be connected, what does that mean then for the kinds of learning that we offer for our students? It can be very seductive, the technology, the shiny devices. I've just grabbed off the net 2 or 3 stories that we've seen flash across the news over the last few months, and you can see that there is a real thirst and a real interest to have access for young people to devices in their hands, access to the web as part of teaching and learning. And in some respects, it can be really easy to think that this is not an instant fix, but certainly, you know, that the technology is somehow the switch that's going to turn on a new kind of learning for our young people. And for many people, it can be. But it certainly doesn't stop just at the provision of the technology. There's a great question that Grant Lickman reminds me of. Grant Lickman was he's an educational consultant working over in the States, and he visited a number of schools a couple of years ago to really exploring what innovation looked like. And in all of those schools, he asked this same question, which I think is incredibly pertinent. He said to the principal and the senior management team, if I walk up and down your corridors and I ask all the teachers what the school is doing that is innovative, how many of them would talk about new technology initiatives? Or how many of them would talk about focusing on being more culturally responsive? How many of them would talk about increased connections to their community? How many would talk about reimagining the curriculum to enhance creativity and cross-curricular links? So trying to get that balance between the new technologies that we can have access to and a kind of new vision for learning is really a space that we are working in this morning, and asking ourselves really, what is the purpose of learning? What is the vision that we're trying to make possible for our young people? Dana Boyd, a great thinker in the space of young people using the technology, reminds us, or she uses the phrase network publics, that the online spaces that we're inviting our young people into, it's a space where we learn about democracy and where we can learn about how society works. And for some young people that can be incredibly positive, But there are also issues beginning to raise their heads as well around the use of data, around things like cyberbullying, around the way huge corporations, for example, Google and so on, how data is used and owned and so on. And these are not pros or cons necessarily that I'm raising here, but they are questions that are beginning to raise their heads in schools around this connected environment in which we find ourselves. And I'm just going to wrap up because I want to quickly move on to our first guest. And what I'm going to do, Sylvia, I'm just going to give you a heads up because I can see that Audrey isn't with us yet this morning, and so I'm going to move in a moment to introduce you, Sylvia, but I'm just giving you a minute's warning there. So the question that's really at the front of our minds, despite all the wonderful opportunities that connectedness can offer for us as teachers and can offer our learners, and I have to say I love this image, that there is no moral compass app, and the responsibility and the opportunity for helping to guide and work alongside young people still sits very much within the curriculum and pedagogy and relationships that we build with our young people. So in this digitally connected world, what might learning look like for our learners, for our akonga, for ourselves as educational professionals? What are the challenges that we're dealing with? What are the opportunities for us? Because the technology can only take us so far. So I just wanted to kind of cue up that context, and without further ado, I'd like to move to introduce, and I'm just going to skip past Audrey, and I'm really hoping that she will be able to join us shortly. But I'd like to introduce to you now Sylvia Rosenthal-Tolosano. Many of you will know her as Languages. And Sylvia, just while I'm doing your introduction, it'd be lovely if you can switch on your camera and get your microphone ready. As you can see from her slide, Sylvia, born in Germany, raised in Argentina, living in the US, beaming in from Florida. Probably a lovely warm afternoon where Sylvia is. International educational consultant, a leader in modern literacies, has co-authored the book Mastering Digital Literacy, Mastering Global Literacy, a huge array of expertise and resources and thinking available online that you can tap into. And I'm delighted to welcome Sylvia to the session this morning to share some of her thinking around what it means to be designing learning in this digitally connected age. So Sylvia, over to you.
Well, thank you, Karen. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to overcome that lag time, the 7-second lag time. So thank you for having me. To me, global connectedness is who I am. Just as Karen introduced me, I was born as a third culture kid. Meaning that I grew up in a country other than my passport country as well. So to me, staying connected to family and friends who did not live down the road was one of those things that that was very important to me from very early on, and being able to get news and information and books and music from in another language or another country. That was part of staying connected. And somehow the technology had not caught up yet with my reality back then. So once the computers were more and more people were having computers, the internet, emails, and then the first mailing listservs to be able to stay connected with people that I didn't even know, but who learned with me, and I shared things with them. That was when I finally realized, this is what I was meant to be. educator. Trying to wrap my mind that what what mean? In terms of my professional professional learning and what does it mean for the professional learning of my colleagues? started saying big idea. Yes. How can I 10 minutes? How can I share that with you? And I came up with for um, for of
some I always think when I craft a tweet, the challenge
is the local isolation.
idea
Um,
140
focusing of
characters, and you
connection
have the same.
and that
Ideas space.
About the
And it's very easy
to
for
be
people to
by
then
myself
connect further with you. I think I'd like to touch on that last point that you made. I'm looking at a comment that Kerry made in the chat about how you try and encourage colleagues to also see that this way of working can complement a way of working in school, and it for yourself. I mean, I'll just ask one question before we introduce Tom. If you were going to respond to Kerry's comment there about how
Thank you. So it seems we have a bit of a delay as well, even though I'm just across the way from Karen. But I think I'm gonna jump in and get started. Thank you for having me. It's great to be rubbing the sleep from my eyes and drinking a coffee and sharing a chat with you guys. So I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the work that we're doing, and also how it's kind of related to the world that I certainly have come from, and as an educator. Interesting to hear from Sylvia there about those really important elements of being a connected educator, something that I certainly experienced back when I was a primary teacher, and continue to do so today. But I think I'm going to take the student perspective. This was a photograph that I took when I was in a school, working with a school in South London, and I had the chance to we had a chance to work with the school around the ways that they were approaching inquiry in the classroom. And this I was in for one particular day, and this 8 or 9-year-old came up to me, and he thrust his hands out in front of him and said, "Look what I've made." And he had this little this little kind of bench that he'd made. They were building these underground shelters for some alternative living. But I obviously got him to freeze for a photo. I just happened to have my camera with me. So one of the things that this picture sort of sums up for me is the importance of children being confident in the things that they're creating. And it was something about the tone of his voice and the look in his eyes of how proud and unabashedly confident he was about what he had created. And if we connect this types of mindset, this sort of deep natural confidence for the things that they create, if we connect that for children with with digital platforms to help push those types of ideas out into the world, I think that we have this multiplier effect. And so I think when we talk about being connected as a connected educator, I think it's about also so much about being able to help connect our students indeed to the world that is around them. And so when I was teaching in the classroom, and something I still support massively today is just having class blogs, having platforms, digital platforms for us to share the story of learning that's going on in our classrooms. And I think we naturally have a propensity to share, to want to share what we create, whether that's kind of writing or things that we kind of make in our projects, or whatever those even thoughts or imaginative ideas. We have a natural propensity to share those things with other people. And children are no different, and are often some of the most pure form of that particular mindset that we'll ever see. I think that changes over time. And I think as a connected educator, we need to be using our technology to be able to kind of multiply that particular effect, because we'll do it anyway. You know, we'll go and find, we'll nag somebody, we'll go and show somebody, we'll talk to our peers, we'll go and find people to share the things that we create. And I think that having digital platforms kind of amplifies some of that particular mindset and gives children new ways to kind of share the things that they make. One of the things that I really liked about what Sylvia was sharing was she talked about local isolation. And the thing that it sort of hit a chord with me was because our creative acts also need not be isolated within just the classroom. And I also share this picture with everybody here who's with us today, not just about that, the fact that we're talking about share, you know, look what I've made, but also it's sort of that children's creative acts are not just for an audience of one, and they're not just for an audience of that person in that classroom, or that even indeed the group of people that are around us. Our creative acts shouldn't be locally isolated, as you know, the words that Sylvia used. We should be using digital platforms to kind of share those beyond our kind of most immediate, you know, local kind of vicinity. So it should be just, you know, more than just one locale that we get to share these things. It's not just for our professional thinking, which I am a huge advocate for, of course, but it should be also for our creative acts. And so, you know, when I think about those platforms, those digital platforms performance, this is a picture of a boy speaking at a TEDx event for kids that we ran for kids in Sunderland in the north of England. And this is the stage, you know, this is their stage. And I share this for a number of reasons. One is to, you know, just to look at the boy's face, for one. It's just a picture, but also to remind us that, you know, we need to offer these opportunities for kids to stand on a stage and to share their work with the world. So that kind of concept of sharing our creative acts beyond an isolated classroom, beyond an isolated audience of one, is also huge. Comment from Karen earlier on about professional critique and how having a blog or a space to write provides us that opportunity. But also when we're sharing our rough work, our ongoing kind of things that we're making and our projects and our thinking and students' acts of creativity into those types of spaces, then it gives us a really interesting opportunity to be able to gain other perspectives upon what we have made. So being able to share, not just like I say, not just as a professional sharing, this is my thinking, how can you, you know, add, mold it, But if that's a creative act for a student, then that's also a great opportunity for us to gain critique and ideas from other people. And I think some of those experiences are some of the most powerful memories I have from the classrooms, being able to offer students an authentic audience. I think those things are still absolutely true today, that just having a simple online space to be able to do that is such a powerful kind of amplifier to the work that goes on in one classroom. But I also want to share with you a couple of the challenges, and I think that this is what why we're all here, is to grapple with some of these challenges. I remember being at a conference back in the UK, and I think I was on a panel or something like the new frontiers of digital learning or something like that it was called, and I was talking about using Twitter and things, and I kind of realized that in fact my perception of it was not, I didn't think it was a new frontier. It had been around for a while. I've been using tools like Twitter and blogs and stuff like that for nearly it's like 7 or 8 years or something like that. So it kind of felt that it wasn't new at all. But we mustn't lose sight of the fact that there's people within our profession who still are not accessing these things, that showing them Twitter, like Sylvia had mentioned, modeling that process of being connected, and indeed doing these long kind of month-long campaigns about being connected. A lot of teachers will still be discovering these opportunities. And I think that that's absolutely the reality of the kind of environment and the work that we're in, is that there's still vast, lots and lots of people who need our support in terms of accessing these types of digital opportunities for ourselves, as Sylvia has outlined, but also, for our students as well. And so I also want to talk to you about another challenge, and this slide always makes me laugh, about the kind of concept of having to Google things. And I suppose Googling it, or as my son calls it, search it up, let's search it up. That concept of Googling something has become synonymous with finding out. And one of, again, I think Karen mentioned it earlier, that idea of the sort of shiny. We saw the pictures of the iPad integration and all those types of things. I think I think the complexity, I actually think the beauty of pedagogy lies in its deep complexity. I think that when we talk about inquiry in the classroom, when we talk about creative acts, then I think that technology sometimes speeds us up. I think sometimes speeds us up unnecessarily. And I think that oftentimes we need to help our students slow down. I think we need to help them to slowly. And so I suppose the way that I sum this up would be to think about helping our students stay in the question. And so I suppose I could have asked the question very openly about what technology or how might technology support our slow understanding or emerging understanding of things. All too often we Google something and we're sort of seeking that kind of quick answer, but we should do more slow search. And I think that that's a combination of different things. I think it's a combination of a range of different types of technology that help us explore things.
I've just been looking at the. It's been pretty fast and furious through there, and thank you for touching on actually 2 or 3 ideas which possibly at first glance sound unconnected, but are I think hugely intertwined in terms of working in a connected world as educators, which Sylvia touched on so beautifully earlier on. And I think
there's so
Tom has
many
extended
huge
an
positives
invitation there for us to
when
think
it comes
about
to being
the
connected as a
purpose
professional.
of those
And
connections,
there's
that
so many
once we
huge
have
positives for us to
bridged a gap
offer
of
that
isolation,
opportunity as a
then
platform for our
what?
learners to help them break
And
that
what kind of a
isolation.
learning
But we
space are
also
we
need
trying to
to
create
recognize
together
that
for our
we need to
learners? And I love this
sometimes
idea of
slow
the
things down.
slow
We
search
need to stay
movement.
in the questioning,
We
and
like
we
slow
need to
food, so
recognize
let's
that
think about
the
slow search, which
discerning use of
requires a really
technology
different
is,
approach to
is
thinking about what
such
we're
a really
doing with our
important
learners,
skill
so
for
we
our
can
students
create
to learn.
space for
So,
that to happen.
Karen,
There's been
maybe an
lots of
opportunity just for a couple of questions
agreement
if
and
you've spotted
supportive
anything there.
comments in the chat, Tom. And I think what I'm going to do is just see whether other questions come through for a second, but also invite a perspective from Tongi Lamanu, who's also here in the room as well. And then we will ask for questions from any of the guests in the last few minutes of the session, if that's okay. I know there'll be a fair few folk in the room mulling over the challenges that you've just shared with us as well, Tom. So thank you very much for that, and for managing the. There's a bit of a delay. God, we got to get that sorted out. Okay, so while we are thinking about this discerning use of technology, to use the phrase that Joe has just shared in the chat there. Whether we're beginning to learn to connect, or whether we are feeling confident in that space and beginning to think about how do we critique our practice, how do we make space for our learners to engage in deep inquiry, I'd like to hand over to Tongi Lamanu, and I want to just give you a second, Tongi, to get your camera on and to grab the mic as well. Tongi is a colleague of mine working in Talofa Lava Tongi. A colleague of mine working in core as a learning digital technologies facilitator, deeply involved in the local Samoan culture in Auckland, and working right across New Zealand to support educators who are thinking about how they use technology to think particularly about the space and design of learning that can ensure that our Pacifica, our Maori learners, that we can see our own culture, we can see our languages in the learning as we kind of harness the technology. And I've invited Tongi this morning just to share a couple of perspectives through that particular lens, building on what Sylvia and Tom have already spoken about this morning. So Tongi, I'm going to ask you to grab the mic there in Auckland. Hopefully the connection is not is going nice and smooth for you, and allow you to introduce yourself and get started. So over to you, Tongi. Whawhata.
Pois. Talo whakatalo whātu new Tuvaluan Language Week this week. E mua lava no whaatalo whātu le paia ma le mamalu au fia mai lene aso. Talofa lava. Thank you, Karen, for letting me be part of this webinar session. This is my second one. So I'm getting a bit used to how things work. And it's really nice to hear Sylvia and Tom share their experience. But I'll be coming and talking to you about the what learning looks like for our Pacifica learners, our Māori learners, and how can digital technologies be part of that. First of all, that learning for Pacifica and Māori learners, it should be fun, and like for any other and every other student throughout the world, learning should be fun, and it should allow Pacifica and Māori learners to open up and explore the opportunities out there for learning. And that's where I can refer back to Tom, how he said that offering opportunities for students to engage in the learning. For me, working with teachers in schools right throughout New Zealand, I always share with them the PowerPoint that I've got, one of the slides, and it's all about addressing prior knowledge, looking at knowing your learner. Who are the learners in front of you? Looking at the Pacifica values that Pacifica learners come with. Using meaningful contexts, their cultural experiences, all these things that we need to look in order to build that relationship with the Pacifica learners. So all those things I think is the start for building that connectedness with the Pacifica or Māori learners. I want to share something with you in terms of work that I've been doing in some of the schools and looking at digital technologies, is giving the learners the opportunity to explore the digital side of it, and actually with teachers modeling. I think it's really important, and giving that time to our Pacifica learners, giving that time for them to explore, giving them time to explore how it works. And one benefit that I've found with working with students is using their language, their Pacifica language, their culture, using their te reo Māori. So that is one thing that actually gives them a sense of belonging, and also proud of who they are as Pacifica or Māori learners. So once again, it's been a real eye-opener for the teachers that I've worked with getting the students to actually use their digital technologies and using it in their own language and sharing their cultural experiences. So all those sorts of things of, once you've got that relationship with them, addressing the prior knowledge, you get meaningful, you get a lot of reciprocal learning, or having that reciprocal relationship with your Māori and Pacifica learners. Some of the challenges that I've seen with my work with teachers throughout New Zealand is looking at creating that tala noa, creating that kōrero, creating that, that discussion, just that conversation with the learner. What they're good at, what do they like about learning, because once again, those are the sorts of things that that I've worked with teachers, and they're going, well, how do we do that? What does that look like? And it's really important to, once again, go back to this prior knowledge thing with, knowing who are your learners in front of you. I've been working with the school in Tauranga, especially with the teachers, because they were quite interested in looking at how do we work, how does the school work with Pacifica learners? How can we engage them in learning? And we must understand that the term Pacifica is a collective term for all the Pacifica nations. And the teachers there had just found out that that Pacifica students would prefer to be acknowledged in their own culture, such as Tongan, such as Samoa, not Pacifica. So it's really important that, and that was the first thing that I've worked with teachers. They've got their heads around that students want to be acknowledged in their Samoan or their language, Samoan or their Tongan cultures. So once again, that was one of the challenges that teachers had to overcome, is actually getting to know who their learners are. So my next step for their learning, the teachers' learning, is looking at pronunciation of names, because that starts to build that relationship with their Pacifica learners. Just in terms of other examples or other stories that I've seen and I've been in, is a teacher in South Auckland, where he has been talking about my portfolios, and how that has changed the engagement of their Pasifika boys. Like it's giving them ownership of their own learning. So I'll put in a link of his talk about my portfolios and how that has worked in his school, in his classroom, around with Pasifika learners, and especially the reluctant boys who didn't really want to get into this whole technology part, but actually modeling it was one good thing that one of the teachers that I've worked with has really emphasized, is actually modeling and going step by step and giving that time for the learner to explore. So yeah, all those things around the prior knowledge, and just for those teachers who are familiar with the Pacific Education Plan, these are the values that Pacifica learners come with to school with, and it's up to us as teachers to how do we embrace these values in the classroom, and that's how we get that connectedness with the Pacifica learners around the values that they come with the school. So I just wanted to share these 2 points, PowerPoint slides around Pacific education, and also catering for Māori learners as well. Any questions?
Whawhatai lava.
We can discuss. Whawhatai lava.
Kia ora, thank you so much. Designing learning, how do we share that with our peers? How do we build a creative culture of visible sharing where we can have discussions like this? I mean, arguably we're kind of doing that this morning. And so I think the 3 themes have run beautifully together, and you have reminded us, Tongi, that right at the heart of what we're trying to do are the regardless of what technologies we might be using, regardless of whether we have access or whether we're working on that infrastructure in our schools and kura, that starting with the learners, starting with their strengths and our relationships with them, and then giving them space to build on those strengths, and then harnessing the technologies to do that is absolutely vital. It is just a couple of minutes past 10 o'clock, and I'm aware that we started a little late, but I would like to just open up the room just for a couple of minutes just to see whether there are any comments or questions before we wrap up. I've been having a quick conversation with Audrey. She is unable to join us this morning. The connectivity is just not going to swing her way today, but that's fine. We can track her down online. And we'll definitely have her back another time. So are there any, I'll just open up the mic if people want to make a comment or ask a question just for the next couple of minutes, and then I'll wrap it up. So if you want to ask a question, could you click the little hands up button at the top of the screen or pop it in the chat. Lots of more comments coming through here, echoing what our speakers have said, which is wonderful. I'll practice my wait time. Sue, I think you've got your microphone on. Just be aware of that. Comments or questions, people? I think there's plenty to take away from today in terms of the challenges that have been opened up. Absolutely not. Kerry, go for it. I think there's been some challenges opened up by all three of our speakers today around how to use the technology to amplify and connect with each other, but also reminding us to think about who we have in front of us every day, where they come from, and how much space we have opened up to allow for that, to allow for the learners to drive their inquiry. As a final comment, and then I'll finish. We had Stephen Heppel with us yesterday, who talked about the amazing creativity and remarkable questions that students can raise and explore when given enough space and feeling comfortable enough to do so. He talked about, he used the collective noun of an astonishment of learners. And I think today we've had a reminder from all of our speakers that given the astute, sensible, balanced use of technology and deep exploration of a pedagogical approach that puts the learners at the heart, that our young people can do remarkable things. So I'd like to extend my thanks to Sylvia, to Tom, to Tongi, to my core colleagues this morning who have been incredibly supportive with the comments and the live tweeting and the blogging. It really is, it's a little whistle-stop tour. It's a taster of what our three guests were able to offer, and you can certainly, they are blogging and tweeting and very available online for you to continue to engage in their ideas. I'd like to invite just very quickly at the end, Tongi and Sylvia and Tom, if you just want to switch your cameras on just for a second, I just want to invite all three of you just to join me at the end here, and I just want to see whether any of you have any other comments to make. Juliet, just while we're here, I'm going to take one final question. Juliet, you've put your hand up. A comment, Juliet? You put your hand up there. That's okay. Either show me with a shake of the head or a raise of the hand. Tongi, Tom, Sylvia, any final comments from you guys this morning? No, all good. Then we will say ka kite, we will say cheerio. That's a very English thing to say, isn't it? We'll say cheerio. A huge thank you for your contribution this morning from all of you, and those of you at ULearn, you'll get to see you'll see Tom next week. Tongi, I think you might be in Aotearoa next week. I'll certainly Sylvia will be here in New Zealand in early 2015. Track them down and continue these conversations after today. So thank you very much. It will be wonderful to hear from any of you. Just a quick 30 seconds. I briefly lost connection there just right at the end. If you're able to grab the link and to share an evaluation, a couple of comments about the session, that would be absolutely wonderful. We'd really appreciate that. I'll make sure that's shared on the website as well. And just to close off, I'd like to just share the brief karakia to close off our session this morning. I'll see some of you back here at 12 o'clock. Kick off our first book group today with guests from NZCER, looking at learning through diversity, authentic design of learning, future-focused ideas. How do we help our young people tackle wicked problems? And I think we've had a real invitation this morning to think about how we create space for young people to engage meaningfully in the world around them. So if you're interested in those ideas, which I'm sure you will be, come back to the room at 12 o'clock and we'll start to explore our first book group for Connected Educator Month. So without further ado, ka whakaaeria te tapu, kia wā te ai te ara, kia tūruki whakataha ai, kia tūruki whakatahi ai, huie takie. Ka kite everyone, thank you so much. Tom, thank you very much. You go and have your breakfast. We'll see you next week. Thanks very much everyone. Wonderful to have had you here this morning.